That's really.
Hello and welcome to Shaka Extra Time, a show that comes to you every Tuesday. Joining me on set is Shaka Sali himself, aka the Kabale Kid. Hello, Shaka.
Hello, Paul.
How are you?
I remain simple, easy, and awesome.
With your incredibly looking, gorgeous shirt.
Guess who is talking? What about you, man?
Okay, today we'll be talking about a wide range of issues, and we'll, for the first time, bring in a surprise guest who is going to interact with us on the Shaka Extra Time. But before we go there, let's maybe start in Rwanda. Something remarkable, Shaka, happened in Rwanda. For the first time in so long, they opened a smartphone manufacturing plant in Rwanda. What a remarkable achievement on behalf of Rwanda.
I think that Rwanda deserves to be congratulated for obviously, coming up with that kind of effort, because the last time I checked, up to now, there has not been a single country on the African continent that was in fact manufacturing those types of things, those types of important gadgets. The only countries I know of which have something to do with those types of gadgets, and that is simply assembling. You're probably talking about Algeria, you're talking about Egypt, you're talking about Ethiopia, and I think South Africa.
But there are people who also say that what is happening in Rwanda is as more of assembling, not really manufacturing.
Well, that is what they say, but Paul, I have often said that when it comes to opinions, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But when it comes to facts, that one, you do not have different sets of different facts. They are facts. Well, and I think from the story that I was able to see, it makes a very significant difference between what they call manufacturing, which apparently is happening in Rwanda, and assembling, which I said has actually is going on in Algeria, in Egypt, in Ethiopia, and I think South Africa.
Maybe I could also add that in 2012, I covered a young man from Congo, Brazzaville, by the names of Varon Manku, who is arguably Africa's Steve Jobs, who started a cell phone and tablet manufacturing company in Congo, Brazzaville, that, by the way, is programmed in local languages, so it has access. It can be accessed by a lot of young people. But maybe what is interesting in Rwanda is that they're actually making those phones for him. He couldn't keep up with the demand, so he had to maybe solicit the expertise of Chinese to help him. Yeah.
But the other thing that I think we should also really be very clear about, we are talking about smartphones.
Correct.
Not simply or just phones.
No, he was doing smartphones. Yes, absolutely.
Really?
Yes, smartphones and smart tablets.
But it was like a sort of individual effort from the way you have been able
since then he has raised enough money to actually go public, because when I talked to him in 2012, that's how many years ago, he had at least, when I talked to him, he had sold about 500,000 units.
It's very interesting, by the way, that the brain is behind this in Rwanda. The man whose name I saw,
Ashish Taka. I've interviewed him several times, yeah.
Yeah, the last time I checked, I thought he was, in fact, a Ugandan citizen. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely correct.
Which means that he basically found, environmentally and commercially friendly environment in Rwanda for him to do that, because he could have actually done it in Uganda, which, even in terms of population, in terms of the numbers and what have you, say, larger market.
Yeah, he seems to have a softer spot in Rwanda. He moved actually most of his holdings, company holdings, to Dubai and Rwanda. So I think it's not surprising that he decided to launch that manufacturing factory out there.
So he probably got what you would say friendly sort of incentives. Yeah, interesting.
And today, for the first time, I told you earlier that we have a surprise guest. So we are going to go to Mona in Germany, who has been a long time fan of Shaka Extra Time. Mona, welcome to Shaka Extra Time.
Hello, Shaka and Paul.
Hello, how are you?
And this is Mona. This is Mona Nambalirwa from Dorsten, German, North Rhine-Westphalia.
Hello, Mona.
Your show is so educative and inspiring. But I have a burning question with me.
Go for it.
Despite the fact that Africa is rich with every natural resource, why is it that most of the African population, we are below poverty line?
It's a very interesting question, Mona, and I think that actually, you know, Paul and I have actually been asking that question, and we've also been asking that type of question on different editions of Straight Talk Africa. Because let's face it.
It bothers me a lot.
Yeah.
It bothers me a lot. I see we have a lot of natural resources, but our people are so poor.
Well, is it possible that we are probably talking about a sort of what would be characterized by people as a leadership deficit? We definitely need a sort of leadership that is visionary, just like the founding fathers in the 1950s and 60s who helped us to end colonialism, as it were, so that African countries could regain political independence from the former European powers. So we probably, in this particular case, really need a legitimate, genuine, you know, kind of like a leadership, really, a new breed of African leaders who can lead the way and liberate our people, because as you say, Mona, Africa, when you think about it in the context of resources, it is probably the richest on this planet Earth. And yet when you look at the quality of life of the African people on the continent, they are pretty much behind everyone else, really. The question is why?
Shaka, let me do a quick follow-up here. You talk about leadership as one of the key things that maybe we need on the continent, but we're talking about Rwanda. Kagame displays a perfect example of leadership. He has championed his country as a tech hub for Africa. Would that be, to his credit, a lot of people go to Rwanda, they're transferring skills there, they're taking these tech companies to Rwanda. So wouldn't that be part of the solution that we are looking for?
It would, but we probably be talking about what we would say in terms of economics and development, a sort of superstructure. What is essentially needed is an infrastructure. And I'm not simply talking about roads or bridges and what have you, but I'm talking about a democratic infrastructure, an idea that is, for example, inclusive, that does not leave anyone behind. And that when you talk about that type of infrastructure, you're talking about the one that has the ability to rally people, to mobilize people, organize them in a disciplined manner, in a very smart manner, in a way that at the end of the day, you are able to deliver what is called social, economic, political justice for everybody. One of the reasons why, for example, the United States of America, one of the reasons why the experiment here succeeded in terms of making the United States, despite the fact that it does not have the largest population on this planet Earth, and yet it boasts the single largest economy, is largely because it is a nation that is built on the basis of ideas, ideas that work, not blood, not color, not religion, but ideas, ideas which are inclusive, ideas that do not leave anybody behind. The United States, I have to say, is not perfect, is not a perfect union. It has a lot of problems and what have you, but it has the ability, it has the social, economic, political shock absorbs that help it somehow figure out a way of making sure that it works. I hear people talk about how democracy is not suited for Africa, for example, because those people say that it is a European or a European-American thing. On the contrary, democracy does not belong to any particular geographical location. It does not belong to any particular racial group. It does not belong to any particular ideology or religion. It is a universal value. And I frankly do not see why we cannot, as Africans, borrow from those countries on this planet Earth that have figured it out and that it works for them. Look at the Scandinavian countries, for example. When you look at the United Nations Human Development Index, you find that most countries that actually score very, very highly, they are from the Scandinavian countries. They are Norway, they are Denmark, they are Sweden, you know, those types of countries. And they provide one of the best quality of lives anywhere on the Earth planet. And it's not about blood, whether you have blue blood or red blood, everybody has red blood.
Yeah, let me do a quick follow-up from David Onserio Monda. He says, Shaka, you've given President Kagame some credit for bringing these tech companies to Rwanda. But one thing that you haven't talked about is how does Kagame negotiate a peaceful transition to democracy when a free, fair, and credible election would certainly hand over power to his minority?
A very good question indeed, and it's probably not as simple as it is, because if it was very simple to answer, I would like to think that by now it would have been not only been answered in Rwanda, but it probably would have also been answered in the neighboring countries of Uganda, of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo, when you talk about Africa being endowed with wealth, you're talking about the epicenter of wealth.
But Democratic Republic of Congo just had a peaceful power transfers.
Well, unfortunately, Paul, I'm not that very optimistic, probably or as optimistic as you. The last time I checked, the Democratic Republic of the Congo probably is only at best democratic in a name. But when you come to the manner in which that particular country is organized, it leaves a lot to be desired.
But in fairness to the Democratic Republic of Congo, you can't compare it with Uganda or Rwanda, for example. At least for them, they have set a precedent. They have said, you know what, we've had enough, and it's about time the president, the incumbent president, handed over power to an opposition leader.
We give them credit, I think, where it is deserved. I think they have done that, except that someone will come and tell you, yes, Did they have, in fact, an election? Yes, they did have an election. But there are people who say actually that that election did not meet what you would call the international democratic threshold. That in fact that election is a type of process that at the end of the day delivered a Felix Tshisekedi as the president. But some people say when you look at that presidency of Felix Tshisekedi, he looks like a man who has a rank, who has a position, but does not seem to have the authority to make things move.
Let's go back to Germany, to our surprise guest in Germany. Mona, you live in Europe. You are in a country that is arguably the largest economy in Europe. What do Africans make of, or Africans in the diaspora there, what do they make of the African politics that we are talking about?
Largely, most of them now, for instance, for my country, Uganda, where I come from, most of the people in the diaspora are so much into politics. Every day they hear what is going on in Uganda, and they don't feel at ease. But really, they always ask, will there ever be free and fair elections in Africa? We were talking on elections, but really, does free and fair election in Africa exist? If we see also in connection with, for instance, countries which are developed like America, there are not free and fair elections. What does it, how does it affect Africa as a whole? If we see what is going on right now in America and what is going on with Africa, what lessons do we draw from that?
Shaka, that's a very interesting take.
Yeah, Mona, I think that, frankly, it probably would not be fair to say when you talk about elections not being free, fair, transparent, and credible, I don't think it would be fair to talk about Africa in general, because there are certain specific situations where elections in some African countries meet that type of threshold. South Africa, for example. South Africa is definitely the beacon of hope for African democracy so far. And in fact, when you look at Southern Africa, the Southern Africa part of the continent, it probably is in the lead in terms of what appears to be democratic governance. You're talking about Botswana, you're talking about Mauritius, you're talking about Namibia, you're talking about really countries that have tried, but let's face it, they are still in a process, because democracy, in fact, the last time I checked, is a work in progress. Even right here in the United States, we do have a debate about what happened in 2016. We seem not to have figured it out yet. When you talk about democracy, I think that African leaders should embrace democracy, because I sometimes wonder why anybody should be asking whether or not democracy is the right medicine for Africa, and yet it seems to be working in the other countries in the world. Like I was talking about the Scandinavian countries, they embrace a sort of democratic system that delivers goods for everybody to be a decent, respected human being. You have, for example, education there. Education there is a right, not a privilege. You have the situation of medical care. When somebody is sick, it is a right, not a privilege. And so I think it can be done. And when you talk about Africans talking about ideas which come from somewhere else, for example, I was looking at electricity. When you look at electricity, nobody bothers, you know, in cavalry where the electric bulb first came from. Nobody even asks the question about a man called Thomas Edison, whether Thomas Edison is a Tutsi, a Hutu, whether Thomas Edison is a Kakwa, a Kikuyu, or a Jaruo, whether Thomas Edison is an Igbo, or Yoruba, or an American, or a European. But what is important is what Thomas Edison contributed. When you switch on a light, the light is not going to ask you which tribe or ethnic community you come from. And you talk about telephones, for example.
Yeah.
We're talking about telephone.
I wanted to do a quick follow-up.
Alexander Graham Bell, a man who was Scottish, migrated to Canada, subsequently to the United States of America, and invented the telephone. In fact, he's buried in Albany, New York, upstate New York, where I went for undergraduate school.
Yeah, Shaka, let's do a quick follow-up on the same topic. Let's go to Ghana. Let's go to Asha Jackson in Accra, Ghana. I'm surprised that you are talking about America not having free, fair elections, but we've done it in Ghana. Ghana has had free, fair elections. Why are you not mentioning Ghana?
Well, by the way, I was not mentioning every country, but if I had come to West Africa, I would definitely have mentioned Ghana. Ghana is not only a pioneer in terms of the indigenous African countries regaining political independence, you know, beginning March 6, 1957 in Accra under the Osagefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. But now that Ghana has a democracy, I would like that Ghana should challenge itself in the same way that Nkrumah challenged the people of Ghana at the time, that the independence of Ghana would be meaningless unless it was linked with the total liberation of the African continent. And Nkrumah did not simply talk the talk. He actually walked the talk so that the rest of Africa could actually walk the walk. Now I can challenge Ghana to challenge itself and its people that the democracy of Ghana would be meaningless unless it is linked with the democratization process of the entire African continent.
Bona, let's get back to you. Do you want to ask Shaka one more question? Now, you're one of those fans who is always like very actively engaged with this show.
One more time. I was following Sudan of recently in September before it ended. They were supposed to form a unitary government, but unfortunately, the opposition leader, Riek Machar, rejected to it. Where do you think Sudan will end up to if they cannot have a unitary government?
Yes, I think that I agree with Paul that you're probably talking about South Sudan, not
South Sudan. Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, they have rejected the pact to have a unitary government. Where do you see Sudan after all these years? Will they ever have peace?
At the end of the day, it's really a matter of time. I think that the only answer, the only solution for the people of South Sudan, just like the people of the entire African continent, it is democracy. It is going to have to be a system that is inclusive, a system that, in a sense, is really, at the end of the day, a system that reflects social, economic, political justice for everybody. Until and unless that happens, I don't think, frankly, that we can talk about the African continent or South Sudan, for that matter, being developing. And it can be done. It's simply a question of having the right leadership. We have a leadership deficit. And part of the reason we do that is because we have yet to come up with a system that allows the people to be the primary stakeholders in terms of the affairs of their societies, so that they can actually have a system that can give them an opportunity to choose who they think should be their leader, not having leaders who impose themselves upon their people. In fact, I sometimes wonder, Paul, why we call even some of these people, leaders. These are people who are busy stealing elections, for example. When you steal an election, you have stolen a country. You use a country, for example, to actually demand for loans from the Bretton Woods institutions. We're talking about the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the ADB, and you name it. And where does that money go? That money, for the most part, does not go to help the real people. It only goes to help a very small group of people who reflect, when they talk about democracy, a government of some people, by some people, for some people. But in fact, what is needed is the definition of democracy according to a one great American president, Abraham Lincoln. By the people and for the people. And so we should have a situation where the people call the shots, not these individuals who call them leaders. In fact, these individuals, they are either imposters. If not imposters, they are rulers. Because if you are a leader, concerns of your people, and you can only do it if you consult them.
Shaka, we are almost running out of time. What are you talking about tomorrow in Straight Talk Africa?
Tomorrow, it's very interesting. We are talking with a lady who comes from the great rich traditions of the Ashanti Kingdom, a princess, Nana Konadu Ajekum Rawlings, someone that served as the first lady of her country for many, many, many years. She's the longest serving first lady in the history of Ghana. She is an incredible lady, and she has written a great book called It Takes a Woman, which traces essentially her journey through life. And we'll be talking about that and many other things tomorrow. Tune in.
Interesting. On that note, thank you to our guest in Germany, Mona. Thank you so much. I will look forward to hosting you on another edition of Shaka Extra Time. And to you here in the studio, thank you so much for your insight, and I look forward to hosting you on another edition of Shaka Extra Time.
Thank you, Ndugu.
Yeah, thank you.